The silence in the dining room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. 24 people sat around Patricia's fancy Christmas table, their forks frozen halfway to their mouths. My mother-in-law's voice still rang in my ears like a fire alarm that wouldn't stop. "You're such a useless wife." Those words hit me like a slap across the face. I sat there, my hands shaking in my lap, staring at the empty spot where the dessert should have been. Everyone was looking at me. My husband Robert's face was red with embarrassment. His sister Claire had this mean little smile on her lips, like she was enjoying every second of this. 4-year-old Tommy tugged at my sleeve. "Mommy, why is Grandma shouting?" His innocent voice made my heart break even more. Patricia stood at the head of the table like a queen judging her subjects. Her gray hair was pulled back so tight it made her face look even meaner. She wore her best red dress, the one she saved for special occasions when she wanted to show off. "I asked you to do one simple thing, Jessica," she continued, her voice dripping with disgust. "Bring dessert. One thing. And you couldn't even manage that. What kind of wife forgets Christmas dessert?" The whole family was watching this train wreck happen. Robert's aunts and uncles shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. His cousins stared at their plates. Even Harold, Patricia's husband, looked down at his hands instead of defending me. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice barely coming out. "I had to take Tommy to urgent care this morning. He had a fever and—" "There's always an excuse with you." Patricia slammed her hand on the table, making the wine glasses shake. "Always something. You're supposed to be taking care of this family, but all you do is make excuses and waste money." That's when something inside me snapped. Waste money? Waste money? I thought about all those times Robert came home saying his mother needed help. "Just $50 for groceries, honey. Mom needs $200 for car repairs. Can we lend her $300? She's having a tough month." Month after month after month. I stood up so fast my chair almost fell backward. The room went dead silent. Even Tommy stopped fidgeting. "You want to talk about wasting money, Patricia?" My voice was steady now, stronger than I'd ever heard it before. "Let's talk about money." Patricia's eyes went wide. She wasn't used to me fighting back. For 3 years, I'd taken her insults and criticism without saying a word. I'd smiled and nodded while she told everyone what a terrible cook I was, how messy my house was, how I wasn't raising Tommy right. Not today. "You call me useless?" I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Then stop calling me when you need money." The color drained from Patricia's face. Claire's fork clattered to her plate. Robert looked like he'd seen a ghost. "What are you talking about?" Harold asked, looking confused. "Oh, your wife hasn't told you?" I turned to face him, then looked around the table at all the shocked faces. "About the $500 she borrowed last month? Or the $300 the month before that? Or the $200 before that?" "Jessica, stop," Robert said quietly, but I was done being quiet. "Stop what? Telling the truth?" I could feel 3 years of anger pouring out of me like water from a broken dam. "Your precious mother has borrowed over $2,000 from us this year alone, while calling me useless." Patricia's face started turning red, then purple. Her breathing got faster and faster. "You're lying!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "You're a liar and a troublemaker. You've been trying to turn my family against me since the day you married my son." That's when things went terribly wrong. Patricia grabbed her chest with both hands, her eyes going wide with panic. I can't breathe." And then she collapsed. 3 weeks before that terrible Christmas dinner, I was folding laundry in our bedroom when Robert came home from work. I could tell something was wrong by the way he avoided looking at me. "Hey, babe," he said, loosening his tie. "Mom called today." My stomach dropped. Patricia's calls always meant trouble for me somehow. "What did she want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice normal while folding Tommy's tiny shirts. Robert sat on the bed and rubbed his face with his hands. She needs help with her electric bill. Says they're going to shut off her power if she doesn't pay by Friday. I stopped folding. How much? $250. I stared at him. We'd just given her $300 last month for what she called emergency car repairs. Before that, it was groceries. Before that, medical bills. Robert, we can't keep doing this, I said carefully. We have our own bills to pay. Tommy needs new winter clothes, and my car is making that weird noise again. I know. He looked tired. But she raised me by herself after Dad left for those 2 years. She worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. I can't just let them shut off her electricity. What about Harold? He's working again, isn't he? Robert shrugged. Mom says his paycheck barely covers the rent and groceries. You know how expensive everything is now. I wanted to argue, but Robert looked so guilty and sad. I loved my husband, and I knew he loved his mother. How could I be the wife who said no to helping family? Okay, I said quietly. But this has to be the last time for a while. We're using our savings for Christmas presents. Robert smiled and kissed my forehead. You're amazing, Jess. I'll write her a check tomorrow. That Saturday, we went to Robert's cousin's birthday party. Patricia was there, of course, wearing a brand new outfit and showing off her freshly done nails to all the other women. Oh, this old thing? She laughed when someone complimented her dress. I've had it forever. I'm so good at finding bargains, you know. Not like some people who waste money on expensive nonsense. She looked right at me when she said it. I was wearing a dress I'd bought at a thrift store for $8. Later, while I was getting Tommy a drink, I overheard Patricia talking to her sister. Jessica just doesn't know how to manage a household, she was saying, loud enough for me to hear. Poor Robert works so hard, and she can't even keep their house clean. Did you see how messy Tommy looked when they arrived? His hair wasn't even combed properly. I'd spent an hour getting Tommy ready that morning. His hair looked fine. And don't get me started on her cooking, Patricia continued. Robert's lost weight since they got married. I keep telling him he needs to come eat dinner at our house more often, get some real food in him. My face burned with embarrassment, but I didn't say anything. I never said anything. The next week, Robert came home with more news. Mom's car broke down, he said. She needs $400 for repairs. I was paying bills at the kitchen table. Our checkbook was right in front of me, showing how little we had left. Robert, we gave her money 2 weeks ago for the electric bill. I know, but what is she supposed to do? She can't get to work without a car. I looked at our bank statement again. If we gave Patricia $400, we'd have barely enough to cover our own mortgage payment. Can't Harold help, or Claire? Claire just got that promotion at her job. Robert shook his head. Mom doesn't want to bother Claire. She's doing so well at work, buying her new house and everything. Mom's proud of her success. But not proud of mine, apparently. I worked part-time at a daycare center, but Patricia always made comments about how I should be home taking care of Tommy instead of dumping him on strangers. Fine, I said, signing the check with shaking hands. But Robert, we need to talk about setting some limits. This can't go on forever. He kissed the top of my head. You're the best wife ever, Jess. I promise I'll talk to her about getting her finances organized. That conversation never happened. Instead, 2 days later, I ran into Patricia at the grocery store. She was buying expensive steaks and a bottle of wine that cost more than I spent on groceries all week. When she saw me staring, she smiled sweetly. Oh, hello, Jessica. Just picking up a few things for Harold's birthday dinner tomorrow. Claire's coming over with her new boyfriend. I want everything to be perfect for my successful daughter. As I watched her walk away with her cart full of expensive food, paid for with money she'd borrowed from us, I felt something cold and angry growing in my chest. But I still didn't say anything. Not yet. 2 weeks before Christmas, Patricia called a family meeting at her house. She loved these meetings because it made her feel important, like the queen of the family giving orders to her subjects. Christmas dinner will be at our house, as always, she announced, standing in her living room like she was giving a speech. Harold and I will handle the turkey and ham. Claire, you're bringing your famous mashed potatoes and green bean casserole. Claire beamed like she'd just won an award. Of course, Mom, I already bought the ingredients. I'm trying a new recipe with truffle oil. Patricia clapped her hands together. Oh, how fancy. My Claire always knows how to make things special. I sat on the couch next to Robert, feeling invisible. Tommy was playing with his toy cars on the floor, making quiet vroom sounds. Robert, you and Jessica will bring the rolls and the dessert, Patricia said, barely looking at me. Jessica, I'm sure you can manage to pick up a nice pie from the bakery. Something simple. We don't want to risk any cooking disasters. The way she said, cooking disasters, made my cheeks burn. Last year, I'd brought homemade cookies that everyone loved, but Patricia had made comments all evening about how they were a bit too sweet, and store-bought would have been fine. Actually, I said, surprising myself with my own voice, I'd like to make a homemade dessert this year. Patricia's smile froze on her face. Oh, well, I suppose that's ambitious of you. Claire laughed. Mom, remember when Jessica tried to make that casserole for Easter? It was so salty nobody could eat it. That was because I grabbed the wrong container, I said quietly. I accidentally used salt instead of sugar in the topping. Mistakes happen, Robert said, squeezing my hand. Patricia waved her hand like she was shooing away a fly. Well, if you insist on making something from scratch, just make sure you have a backup plan. Maybe buy a pie anyway, just in case. I felt my face getting hot. I won't need a backup plan. Of course not, dear, Patricia said in that fake sweet voice she used when she thought I was being stupid. I'm sure whatever you make will be adequate. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Patricia's smug face and Claire's mean laugh. I wasn't a bad cook. I made dinner for my family every night. Tommy loved my pancakes on Saturday mornings. Robert always said my spaghetti sauce was better than his mother's. So why did I always feel so small around Patricia? The next day, I went to the library and checked out 3 cookbooks. I was going to make the best apple pie Patricia had ever tasted. I was going to prove that I wasn't useless. I spent the whole week practicing. I made pie after pie, trying different apple types and spice combinations. I watched YouTube videos about perfect pie crusts. I even called my own mother for her secret tips. Honey, why are you putting so much pressure on yourself? Mom asked during one of our calls. It's just pie. It's not just pie, Mom. It's about respect. By the second week of December, I had the perfect recipe. My apple pie was golden brown with a flaky crust and perfectly spiced filling. Even the daycare kids where I worked begged for seconds when I brought in my test pies. But Patricia wasn't done making me feel terrible. The following Sunday, we went to Harold's company Christmas party. Patricia introduced Claire to everyone as my daughter, the marketing manager. When people asked about me, Patricia would say, "Oh, this is Jessica. She's Robert's wife." No mention of my job at the daycare. No mention of how I was studying online to get my early childhood education certificate. Just Robert's wife. Like that was all I was. During dinner, Patricia told a story about Claire's latest promotion, while I sat there eating my salad in silence. Claire is so smart with money, Patricia bragged. She just bought that beautiful new house and she's already talking about redecorating the whole thing. I'm so proud of how successful she is. I wanted to scream. Claire was successful because she didn't have a 4-year-old to take care of. She didn't have a husband whose mother constantly needed money for emergencies. She didn't work part-time so she could be home when Tommy got sick or had school events. Jessica works too, Robert said, trying to include me in the conversation. Patricia nodded politely. Oh yes, the daycare. That's nice. It's almost like practice for taking care of Tommy, isn't it? I wanted to tell her that my job wasn't practice. I had a degree in child development. I was helping shape young minds and supporting working families. But Patricia made it sound like I was just playing with kids all day. That night, I stayed up late perfecting my pie recipe one more time. I was going to show everyone, especially Patricia, that I wasn't just Robert's wife who worked at a daycare. I was Jessica, and I could make an amazing apple pie. If only I had known that making the perfect pie would be the least of my problems that Christmas. 3 days before Christmas, everything started falling apart. Christmas morning started at 5:30 when Tommy crawled into our bed, burning up with fever. "Mommy, I don't feel good," he whispered, his little body shaking against mine. When I touched his forehead, it was like touching a hot stove. Robert was already getting dressed for work. He had to finish an emergency electrical job before we could go to his mother's house for dinner. "His temperature is 102, I said, checking the thermometer again. "I need to take him to urgent care." "Today? But it's Christmas," Robert said, looking worried. "Can't you give him some medicine and see if it helps?" I looked at my baby's flushed face and glassy eyes. "Robert, he's really sick. This isn't just a little cold." Okay. You're right. Take him in. I'll meet you at Mom's house as soon as I finish this job." By 6 in the morning, Tommy and I were sitting in the urgent care waiting room. The place was packed with other families whose Christmas morning had been ruined by sick kids. We waited for 3 hours. 3 hours of Tommy crying and asking when we could go home. 3 hours of me trying to keep him comfortable while watching the clock tick away my pie baking time. 3 hours of other parents giving me dirty looks when Tommy's coughing got too loud. Finally, Dr. Peterson called us back. After examining Tommy, he said it was just a bad viral infection, but Tommy needed rest and lots of fluids. "No daycare for the rest of the week," he said, writing notes in Tommy's chart. "And watch his fever closely. If it goes over 103, bring him back immediately." We didn't get home until 11:30. I was exhausted, and Tommy was cranky and clingy. All I wanted to do was curl up on the couch with him and watch Christmas movies. But then I remembered. The pie. I had planned to make it fresh that morning so it would be perfect for dinner. Instead, I had exactly 4 hours to get Tommy settled, shower, wrap the last few presents, make the pie, and get us both dressed and ready. I could do this. I had to do this. I gave Tommy some medicine and set him up on the couch with his new tablet and a cup of juice. Then I ran to the kitchen and started pulling out ingredients. But everything went wrong. First, I realized we were out of butter. I had to bundle sick Tommy back into the car and drive to the only store that was open on Christmas, a tiny convenience store that charged 3 times the normal price. When we got back, Tommy had a meltdown because he was tired and felt awful. He cried for 20 minutes straight while I tried to make pie crust with shaking hands. Then the phone rang. It was Claire. "Jessica, Mom wants to know what time you'll be there. She's worried about the timing for dinner." I looked at the clock. It was already 2 o'clock, and I hadn't even started rolling out the crust. "We'll be there by 5, I said, trying to sound calm. 5? Dinner's at 4:30. Mom specifically said 4:30. My heart sank. I thought dinner was at 5. I'd written it wrong on my calendar. "I can be there by 4:15, I said quickly. "Well, make sure you are. You know how Mom gets when people are late." After I hung up, I wanted to cry. Tommy was still fussy, the pie crust kept falling apart, and now I was running even later than I thought. But I kept going. I rolled out the crust, peeled and sliced the apples, mixed in the perfect blend of spices I'd spent weeks perfecting. The pie went into the oven at 3:15. While it baked, I threw Tommy and myself into the shower, got us both dressed in our nice Christmas clothes, and wrapped the last few presents. I was moving like a crazy person, checking the pie every few minutes. At 4 o'clock, the pie came out of the oven. It was perfect, golden brown, with the sweet smell of cinnamon and apples filling the kitchen. All my practice had paid off. "Come on, baby," I told Tommy, scooping him up. "Time to go to Grandma's house." I grabbed the presents, my purse, and Tommy's medicine. My hands were full, but I was proud of myself. Despite everything going wrong, I'd made it work. The pie was beautiful, we looked nice, and we'd only be 15 minutes late. I loaded everything into the car, buckled Tommy into his car seat, and drove to Patricia's house with a smile on my face. It wasn't until we were standing on Patricia's front porch, listening to the sounds of family dinner through the door, that I realized what I'd forgotten. The pie was still sitting on my kitchen counter, cooling next to the dirty mixing bowls. Standing in that dining room with everyone staring at me, I felt like I was watching myself from outside my body. 3 years of staying quiet, 3 years of taking Patricia's insults with a smile, 3 years of pretending everything was fine. Not anymore. September 15th, I said, my voice getting stronger. You needed $500 for emergency car repairs. Robert gave you a check that same day. Patricia's face was turning red, but I wasn't finished. October 20th, $300 for medical bills that insurance wouldn't cover. November 10th, $200 for groceries because Harold's paycheck was late. Jessica, stop, Robert said quietly, but his voice sounded weak. Stop what? Telling everyone the truth? I looked around the table at all the shocked faces. Your mother has borrowed over $2,000 from us this year, while calling me useless. Harold dropped his fork. It clattered on his plate like a gunshot in the silence. What medical bills? What car repairs? Patricia opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time in 3 years, she had no sharp comeback ready. Tell him, Patricia, I said, feeling power I'd never felt before. Tell your husband about the medical bills that were really for your manicures and hair appointments. Claire stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. You're lying! Mom would never what? I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my bank app. Want to see the check copies? The text messages where she begged us not to tell anyone about the loans? I found the message from October and read it out loud. Please don't mention the money to Harold or Claire. They don't understand how tight things are right now. You're such a blessing, Jessica. The room was dead silent, except for Tommy asking why everyone looked so serious. Patricia stammered, but her face was getting darker by the second. November 28th, I continued, scrolling through more messages. You texted Robert asking for grocery money, but I saw you at the store that same week buying expensive steaks and wine for Claire's visit. Harold's face went pale. Patricia, is this true? Or how about December 5th? I was on a roll now, months of anger pouring out like a broken dam. You needed $200 for heating oil, but when I drove past your house that night, all the lights were on and the heat was cranked up so high you had the windows open. You were spying on me? Patricia's voice cracked. I was driving home from Tommy's doctor appointment. Your house lit up like a Christmas tree doesn't exactly scream, can't afford heating oil. Robert looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Jess, maybe we should talk about this at home. No! I turned to face him. I'm done protecting her feelings while she destroys mine. Do you want to know what she really needed that heating oil money for? Patricia's breathing was getting faster. You don't know anything. Lottery tickets, I said loudly. I found the receipts in your purse when I was looking for Tommy's inhaler last week. Scratchers, Powerball, Mega Millions, $200 worth. The silence was so heavy I could feel it pressing down on my chest. Even the kids at the far end of the table had stopped talking. Harold slowly turned to look at his wife. Patricia? It's not what it sounds like, Patricia said, her voice shaking. Sometimes I buy a few tickets. Everyone does that. It's not a problem. A few tickets? I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. You spent our rent money on gambling while telling everyone I'm a terrible wife who can't manage a household. Claire sank back into her chair. Mom, you told me Jessica was bad with money. You said she was making Robert go into debt with her shopping. I shop at thrift stores, I shouted. I buy generic cereal and clip coupons. I haven't bought myself new clothes in 6 months because we keep giving your mother money. That's when Patricia finally exploded. How dare you? She screamed, standing up so fast her chair fell backward. How dare you come into my house on Christmas Day and embarrass me in front of my family? Her face was purple now, veins bulging in her neck. You're jealous. You're jealous because Claire is successful and beautiful and everything you'll never be. I'm not jealous, I said calmly. I'm tired of being your scapegoat while you gamble away our money. Patricia pointed a shaking finger at me. "You're trying to turn my family against me. You're poison. You've been poisoned since the day my son married you." She was breathing so hard I could hear it across the room. Her hands were shaking, and sweat was beading on her forehead despite the cool temperature. "Patricia, calm down," Harold said, reaching for her arm, but she jerked away from him, her eyes wild and unfocused. "No, I won't be calm. This little witch has been plotting against me for years." That's when she grabbed her chest and started gasping for air. Patricia's hand flew to her chest, her fingers clawing at her red Christmas dress like she was trying to rip it off. Her face had gone from purple to a scary gray color. I can't breathe," she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. For a second, nobody moved. After all her dramatics over the years, her fake headaches when she didn't want to babysit Tommy, her mysterious back pain whenever there was housework to do, we all thought this was just another performance. "Mom, stop being dramatic," Claire said, rolling her eyes. "Jessica already embarrassed you enough. Don't make it worse." But something about Patricia's face made my stomach drop. This wasn't her usual fake sick routine. Her lips were turning blue, and she was making weird gasping sounds like a fish out of water. "Robert?" I said quietly, but he was staring at his mother with his mouth hanging open. Patricia tried to take a step toward the table, maybe to sit down, but her legs gave out. She stumbled forward, reaching out to catch herself, but there was nothing to grab. She hit the corner of the dining room table with a sickening thud. The sound of her head hitting the wood was like someone dropping a watermelon. Everyone heard it. Even the kids at the other end of the table stopped talking and turned to look. Patricia crumpled to the floor like a broken doll. That's when everyone started screaming. "Oh my God!" Claire shrieked, jumping up from her chair. "Mom! Mom!" Harold was on his feet, but he just stood there frozen, like his brain couldn't process what he was seeing. Robert finally moved, dropping to his knees beside his mother. "Mom? Mom, can you hear me?" He shook her shoulder gently, but Patricia didn't respond. Her eyes were closed, and there was blood trickling from a cut on her forehead where she'd hit the table. "Is she breathing?" someone asked, but I couldn't tell who because everything sounded muffled and far away. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. 911, what's your emergency?" "My mother-in-law collapsed," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "She was having trouble breathing and then she hit her head when she fell. She's unconscious." "What's the address?" I gave the dispatcher Patricia's address, while Robert checked for a pulse. His face was white as paper. "She's breathing, but it's really shallow," he said, "and her pulse feels weird, too fast." "Sir, is the person conscious?" I could hear the dispatcher asking questions. "No, she's not responding at all." The dispatcher walked me through, checking Patricia's breathing and pulse while we waited for the paramedics. Claire was crying hysterically, calling Patricia's name over and over. Harold just stood there like a statue, staring down at his wife with empty eyes. "Everyone needs to give her space," I said, gently moving people back. Some of the family members were crowding around, making it harder for Robert to help. Tommy tugged on my sleeve. "Mommy, why is Grandma sleeping on the floor?" "She's sick, baby. The doctors are coming to help her." The paramedics seemed to take forever, but it was probably only about 8 minutes. When they finally arrived, they moved fast. One of them checked Patricia's head injury while the other attached some kind of machine to her chest. "Looks like she's had some kind of cardiac event," the first paramedic said to his partner. "Elevated heart rate, irregular rhythm, and this head injury could be serious." They put a neck brace on Patricia and lifted her onto a stretcher. She looked so small and fragile lying there, nothing like the powerful woman who'd been screaming at me just minutes before. "We're taking her to General Hospital," the paramedic told us. "Family can follow in your own vehicles." As they wheeled Patricia out of the house, Harold finally spoke. "This is your fault," he said quietly, but his words cut through the chaos like a knife. He was looking right at me. She was fine until you started your lies. Harold? That's not fair, Robert started, but his father cut him off. She's in the hospital because of what your wife did, Harold said, his voice getting louder. All that stress, all that embarrassment. Patricia's blood pressure has been high for months. The doctor told her to avoid stress. Claire nodded through her tears. Mom told me she was worried about money. She said Jessica and Robert were always asking for loans and it was making her anxious. I felt like I'd been slapped. Even now, even with Patricia unconscious in an ambulance, they were still believing her lies. We need to get to the hospital, Robert said, but he wouldn't look at me. As we drove through the dark Christmas evening, following the ambulance's flashing lights, I wondered if I'd just destroyed everything. The hospital waiting room smelled like disinfectant and fear. We'd been sitting there for 3 hours and nobody was talking to me. Harold sat in the corner with his head in his hands. Claire paced back and forth, her fancy Christmas dress wrinkled and stained with tears. Robert held Tommy, who had finally fallen asleep despite all the chaos. Dr. Martinez came out at 10:30 that night, still wearing his surgical scrubs. The good news is, Mrs. Winters is going to be okay, he said, and everyone let out a breath they'd been holding. She suffered a mild heart attack, likely brought on by extreme stress and undiagnosed high blood pressure. Harold looked up. Heart attack? But she's only 56. Stress can be a major trigger, especially when combined with other risk factors. Has she been under unusual pressure lately? Everyone looked at me. I wanted to disappear into the floor. The head injury required 12 stitches, but there's no sign of serious brain damage. However, she's going to need to make some major lifestyle changes. Less stress, better diet, regular exercise, and she needs to follow up with a cardiologist. Dr. Martinez looked around at our guilty faces. She's awake now if you'd like to see her, but keep it brief and calm. No stressful conversations. Patricia looked tiny in the hospital bed, hooked up to machines that beeped and hummed. The bandage on her forehead made her look fragile and old. When she saw me walk in behind Robert, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered, so quietly I almost didn't hear her. We all stared at her. Patricia never apologized for anything. "I'm sorry, Jessica. I'm sorry to all of you." Her voice was shaky and weak. "The doctor says I could have died tonight." Harold sat down in the chair next to her bed. "Patricia, we need to talk about the money, about the gambling." She closed her eyes and more tears leaked out. I know you all hate me now." "We don't hate you, Mom," Robert said softly, "but we need to understand what's been happening." Over the next hour, the truth came spilling out. Patricia had started buying lottery tickets 2 years ago, just a few dollars here and there. But when Harold was out of work for 3 months, she got desperate. The small bets became bigger ones. The occasional ticket became daily trips to the convenience store. "I kept thinking the next ticket would be the winner," she said, staring at the ceiling. "I'd win enough to pay Robert back and still have money left over, but I just kept losing." "Why didn't you tell me?" Harold asked, holding her hand. "Because I was ashamed. And because—" She looked at me. "Because it was easier to blame Jessica for our money problems than admit I was the one causing them." Claire sat down heavily in another chair. "Mom, you made me think Jessica was a terrible wife. You said she was irresponsible with money." "I know." Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. "I was jealous. Jessica has what I never had. She married a good man who loves her for who she is, not for what she pretends to be. And she's a good mother. Better than I was." I felt tears starting in my own eyes. This wasn't the Patricia I knew. "The doctor says I need to go to counseling," Patricia continued, "for the gambling and for other things. He says I have something called anxiety disorder, and that might be why I've been so angry all the time." Harold squeezed her hand. "We'll figure it out together. But no more lies, Patricia. No more borrowing money without telling me. No more lottery tickets." She nodded, looking exhausted. 6 months later, I was frosting Tommy's 5th birthday cake when the doorbell rang. Patricia stood on my front porch holding a small wrapped box, looking nervous. "I know I'm not invited to the party," she said quietly, "but I wanted to give Tommy his present." "You are invited," I said, opening the door wider. "Your family." She'd kept her promise. No more gambling, regular therapy sessions, and she was taking medication for her anxiety. She still wasn't warm and fuzzy, but she wasn't cruel anymore either. "Thank you," she said, stepping inside. "For calling 911 that night. The doctor said if you hadn't acted so fast, anyone would have done the same thing." She shook her head. "Not after how I treated you. I spent 3 years trying to make you feel small because it made me feel bigger. That was wrong." As Tommy ran up to hug his grandma, I realized something had shifted. Patricia would never be my favorite person, but she didn't have to be my enemy either. Sometimes the truth hurts before it heals, but it always heals eventually.